The day Daniel Cole's business collapsed, his wife wore diamonds. Reporters shouted his name on the courthouse steps, calling him the man who lost everything. But as cameras flashed, Lydia Cole stood beside him. Perfect smile, flawless dress, not a trace of the storm that was drowning her husband's life. She held his arm for the pictures. But her eyes, they kept drifting toward the man behind the cameras, his best friend, Andrew Carter. That night, while Daniel sat alone staring at the ashes of 15 years of work, Lydia's phone lit up under their bedsheet. A message. Same suite, midnight, and the initials, AC. The man who helped destroy his business was the same man destroying his marriage. But Daniel didn't confront her. Not yet. He simply whispered to himself, if truth is quiet, then so is revenge. Because what he was about to discover would shatter everything, not just his business, not just his marriage, but the very blood that carried his name. So the question is, when a man loses everything he built and finds out who his wife was secretly seeing, what's left for him to destroy? And how far will he go when he learns the unimaginable? The laughter in the conference room wasn't the kind that heals. It was the kind that leaves splinters in a man's soul. Daniel Cole sat in silence as the last investor closed his laptop. The words, "We'll reconsider when your numbers recover," echoed long after the door shut. His company, once valued at $30 million, was collapsing in slow motion. One delayed payment, one bad quarter, and one betrayal at a time. He loosened his tie, staring at the city skyline beyond the glass. That skyline used to feel like a promise. Now it looked like a judge. Behind him, Andrew Carter, his oldest friend and co-founder, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this, brother. Just don't tell Lydia yet. She panics fast." Daniel nodded weakly, but something in Andrew's tone made him look up. A flicker, too rehearsed, too steady. Outside, reporters were already whispering about Cole Industries' collapse. Inside, Daniel's phone buzzed with Lydia's messages. "Dinner at 7? Mom's coming. Please look alive." He typed back, "I'll be there." He didn't know it would be the last time he ever texted her as a husband who trusted. At dinner, Lydia wore a red dress too bright for the evening. Her laughter filled their penthouse dining room like champagne. Bubbly, loud, staged. Her mother, Margaret, smiled over wine. "You know, Daniel, a woman needs security. If your business is drowning, maybe let Lydia handle the household expenses." Daniel smiled politely. He'd learned to let their insults glide like raindrops off marble. But halfway through the meal, his phone rang. Graham Wells, his financial partner. He excused himself to answer. "Graham, your signature's on a transfer you didn't make. $2 million. Gone. Offshore." The room spun. His chest tightened. "Who authorized it?" Silence. Then, "Andrew, using your login. Said it was urgent." Daniel's hand went cold. He turned toward the dining table where Andrew's laughter, his friend's laughter, still echoed faintly in memory. His wife poured more wine, unbothered by his absence. Her phone blinked once, then twice under the tablecloth. New message. A name flashed. Andrew C. Daniel froze. In that moment, the collapse of his business no longer mattered. Something darker, quieter, far more intimate had begun to collapse inside him. He returned to the table. Lydia smiled. "Everything okay?" Daniel's voice was calm. "Yeah, everything's about to get clearer." As he picked up his glass, the reflection showed the wedding ring he still wore, and the faintest crack of gold at its edge. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The city lights leaked through the blinds, slicing his living room into bars of golden shadow. Lydia's perfume still lingered on the couch. Expensive, floral, deceitful. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed again. Another alert. A withdrawal. He opened the bank app, his jaw tightening. A hotel transaction, the Marlowe Suites, $1,200. The timestamp, midnight. He checked the calendar. Lydia had said she was at a girls' dinner. Daniel exhaled slowly. The breath sounded like disbelief. He didn't shout, didn't storm into the bedroom. He just sat in the dark, watching her sleep, her hand draped lazily over the side of the bed. Wedding ring catching the moonlight. She looked peaceful, almost innocent. But innocence doesn't hide passwords under fake names. The next morning, Daniel drove to the hotel. He told the manager he'd left his company credit card there. The manager smiled, polite but cautious. "We can check security footage if you can confirm the date." He did. Minutes later, Daniel stood before a monitor, the footage playing silently. At 11:47 p.m., Lydia entered the lobby, hood pulled low, sunglasses despite the night. At 11:49, Andrew followed, his hand brushing hers briefly as they crossed the marble floor. Daniel's mouth went dry. The manager looked away, embarrassed. "Do you want me to delete the record, sir?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I want a copy." When he returned home, Lydia was making breakfast. She looked radiant, humming to herself, barefoot in silk. She turned as he entered. "Morning, you look tired." "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Too many numbers in my head." "Then you should rest," she said softly, brushing his shoulder as she passed. "You've been under so much stress." Her touch felt foreign, the kind strangers use when they don't mean it. That afternoon, Daniel drove to his lawyer's office. He didn't mention the affair. Not yet. He asked for help reviewing company losses. Quietly, he requested private investigators for financial tracing. By evening, he had the footage, account statements, and 2 months of location data synced to an encrypted drive. He replayed the video once more that night, watching the moment Andrew's hand rested on Lydia's back as the elevator doors closed. It wasn't rage that filled him. It was something slower, colder, methodical. He remembered his father's voice from years ago. "Never destroy an anger, son. It makes you look guilty." So Daniel smiled faintly. He'd destroy them with proof. The next week, Lydia began asking about their life insurance. She spoke softly, her tone practiced, her concern artificial. He pretended not to notice. He even kissed her forehead one night and whispered, "You're my reason for everything." She smiled, guilt flickering for half a heartbeat before she swallowed it down. But Daniel had already begun his quiet rebuild. One piece of evidence, one strategic favor, one lawyer's whisper at a time. He wasn't preparing for revenge yet. He was preparing for war. And when the first truth finally hit the table, it wouldn't just expose betrayal, it would erase the illusion of family itself. Daniel sat in his car outside St. Michael's Elementary, the afternoon sun washing the windshield in soft orange light. Parents waited in cheerful clusters. Laughter, backpacks swinging, normal life. He watched Ethan, his 8-year-old son, run toward him, all joy and sweat and missing teeth. Lydia followed behind, waving from across the parking lot, smiling like everything was perfect. He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because this morning, something had broken quietly inside him. The call had come from his lawyer's private investigator. "Mr. Cole, you asked for full financial tracing. We found something else." Daniel frowned. "Something else?" "DNA. Lydia used the company medical plan for 2 paternity tests 8 years ago. The father listed on both isn't you." He hadn't spoken for a full minute. The silence on the line felt like a funeral. "Send me the files," he'd said finally. Now the envelope sat on the passenger seat beside him, unopened, yet heavier than anything he'd ever lifted. Ethan climbed into the car. "Dad, can we get ice cream?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Of course." Because none of it was Ethan's fault. They drove in silence. Lydia texted twice. "You picked him up, right?" Then, "Dinner at 7. Her tone read like ownership. When Daniel got home, he found Lydia humming again in the kitchen, pouring wine. "You look pale, honey. Everything okay?" He placed the envelope on the counter. "Yeah," he said calmly. "Just got something from the office." "Anything I should worry about?" He smiled. "Not yet." Later that night, after she fell asleep, Daniel opened the envelope under the dim light of his office desk. 2 sheets, 2 names. Ethan Cole, father Andrew Carter. Lily Cole, father Andrew Carter. The paper trembled in his hand. His mind didn't. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the wedding photo on the wall. Lydia's smile glowed, framed in gold. Andrew's signature, on the best man's line, hung just below it. He whispered, "You've both been in the same picture all along." He didn't cry. He didn't curse. Instead, he began writing names, dates, accounts, transfers, every deceit. Then he picked up the phone and called Elaine Parker, the one lawyer he knew didn't believe in mercy. "Elaine," he said quietly, "I need you to build me something stronger than a divorce case." "What kind of case?" He looked at the photo one more time. "The kind that ends careers." The next morning, Lydia woke to find Daniel gone, a note on her pillow. "Take care of the kids today. I have meetings." What she didn't know was that her husband's meetings were with accountants, forensic analysts, and a retired judge who owed him a favor. What she didn't know was that the man she thought was broken was already building his revenge brick by brick, because love might forgive, but betrayal has perfect memory. Daniel began waking before dawn, not to work, but to plan. Every morning at 4 a.m., while Lydia and the kids slept upstairs, he sat at the dining table surrounded by files, coffee, and silence. The man who once built a company was now building a case. He had learned the rhythm of betrayal. It breathes, hides, and grows only where silence lets it. So he made silence his weapon. He started small, rewriting passwords, redirecting mail, retrieving old contracts Darren had once signed on his behalf. He contacted the forensic accountant Elaine recommended, a quiet man named Julian Briggs, who spoke little and charged much. Within a week, Daniel had a spreadsheet tracing every dollar Darren and Lydia had stolen. Offshore transfers, fake reimbursements, even private payments labeled consulting. Julian looked up from the numbers one night and said, "You've been robbed by the people who sleep closest to you." "That's a different kind of theft." Daniel nodded. "That's why I'm not calling the police." Julian frowned. "Then who?" "Court," Daniel said, "but not until they think they've won." That same week, Lydia began acting sweeter, making his favorite meals, showing up in his office with coffee, touching his shoulder when she passed. Daniel played along. He complimented her perfume, kissed her goodnight, even booked a weekend trip to Napa Valley. To her, it looked like reconciliation. To him, it was reconnaissance. At night, while she showered, he copied her text to a mirrored backup. Every secret message to Andrew fed into his hidden drive. He learned their meeting spots, their language, their tone. "You're safe," Andrew wrote once. "He's too proud to suspect." Pride, Daniel thought, is a mask, and mine is cracking on purpose. He started calling Andrew again, pretending to mend their partnership. "Maybe we can rebuild something," he said. "You were right about diversifying." Andrew's voice came warm, cautious. "Good to hear, man. I always said we're stronger together." "Let's meet next week," Daniel offered. "Dinner on me. I have something you'll want to see." "Sure thing, Ivern," Andrew said. "I'll bring the old contracts. We can fix this." Daniel smiled after hanging up. "You already did," he whispered. Meanwhile, Elaine Parker filed quiet motions, asset audits, ownership reviews, delayed notices that no one read. She smiled through each one. "Every signature they forged will be a knife they handed us," she told him. By the third week, Daniel had evidence stacked higher than his trophies. Bank logs, DNA reports, voice messages, even photos of Lydia entering the Marlowe suites. And then came the moment he'd been waiting for. Lydia asked one night, "Daniel, what if we sold the house? Started fresh somewhere, smaller?" Her voice trembled slightly. She wasn't suggesting a restart. She was securing her escape route before the truth exploded. Daniel looked at her with gentle eyes. "Sure," he said softly. "We'll start over. Just a few more things to finalize first." She smiled, relieved. "You're really trying again." "I am," he said, kissing her cheek, and in his mind, he finished the sentence she'd never hear. "Trying to end you properly." The next morning, he met Andrew for dinner as planned. He wore calm, like a tailored suit. Across the table, Andrew laughed easily, unaware that Daniel's phone on the table was recording everything. "You and Lydia," Daniel said with a grin. "You've always gotten along too well." Andrew chuckled. "Hey man, she's like a sister to me." Daniel's smile didn't move. "Funny, because I've never seen a man text his sister from hotel rooms at midnight." Andrew froze, the color draining from his face. Daniel leaned forward. "Don't worry, I'm not here to shout. I'm here to let you bury yourself." And when Andrew finally stood, stammering excuses, Daniel said quietly, "This isn't the end, Andrew. This is pretrial." By the end of that week, Daniel had learned something most people never do. Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with patience that looks like peace. He wore that peace perfectly. At work, he showed up early, smiled for the staff, shook hands like a man forgiven by life. The gossip around the office said he'd made peace with failure, that he was rebuilding, that he'd found closure, and Lydia believed every word of it. She began inviting friends again, hosting small dinner parties filled with laughter and shallow toasts. The same people who once whispered about their failing marriage now posted pictures online. The Coles are back. Daniel watched it all, quietly helping her build the stage she didn't know he'd later burn. The first step of his revenge wasn't public. It was psychological. He wanted her confident, comfortable, unaware. So he left hints of hope. A compliment here, a shared glass of wine there, small reassurances that made her trust him again. He listened when she talked about her influencer brand, her dreams, her plans. And when she said, "I just want to feel secure again," he smiled. "You will." Behind that smile, he had already bought back controlling shares of his former company under a silent holding name. Elaine had set up the paperwork flawlessly. By the time Lydia was posting "date night with my amazing husband," Daniel already owned the empire she thought he lost, and 100% of the evidence that would destroy her reputation. Next came perception. Elaine hired a quiet PR strategist, a woman named Monica Wells, who specialized in what she called narrative reversal. Her job was simple: plant the idea that Daniel was a man wronged, a visionary betrayed by greed. Small stories began to appear online, anonymous posts about unethical partners, and a wife with questionable loyalties. Nothing direct, just whispers, believable enough to make people curious. Then Daniel made his next move. He convinced Lydia to host a charity gala for a new beginning. The event was perfect: chandeliers, velvet dresses, press photographers, champagne towers. Daniel stood by her side, calm, flawless, smiling for every flash. Across the room, Andrew arrived late, confident, unbothered, wearing the same smirk Daniel had memorized from the security footage. As the cameras rolled, Daniel stepped to the mic. "Tonight," he said, "is about trust, about rebuilding, about second chances." Lydia beamed, clapping proudly. Then the screens around the ballroom flickered to life. One by one, images appeared. Emails, messages, receipts, Lydia's words, Andrew's hotel bookings, a photo of them together at the Marlowe Suites. The room went silent. Lydia froze. Andrew stepped back, his face draining of color. Guests whispered. Phones came up. Flashes erupted again. Not admiration this time, but scandal. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't explain. He simply placed the microphone down, looked at Lydia with calm, unbearable gentleness, and said quietly, "You wanted a new beginning. Now everyone knows how it started." He walked off the stage and into the corridor, leaving her surrounded by stunned faces and photographers closing in. Outside, Elaine was waiting in a black car. "Phase 1?" she asked. "Complete," Daniel said. "Now we take it to court." As the car drove away, behind them the sound of chaos swelled. Lydia's perfect world cracking open under her own spotlight. And for the first time in months, Daniel exhaled. But it wasn't relief, it was preparation. Because humiliation was only the opening act. The courtroom would be the execution. The first subpoena landed on a Tuesday morning. Lydia opened the door still wearing her robe, holding her coffee, her hair a mess of sleepless curls. The courier handed her the envelope and said softly, "Mrs. Cole, you've been served." She laughed at first, nervously, like someone who still believed everything could be undone with charm. But the laughter died as she read the first line. Notice of civil action, fraudulent misrepresentation, marital misconduct, and financial deception. By noon, her phone was full of messages. Her mother's voice trembled through the speaker. "Lydia, what did you do?" Her manager texted, "Brand partners are pulling back. What's going on?" Andrew called 5 times. She didn't answer. Daniel, meanwhile, was in a quiet office downtown, sipping black coffee across from Elaine Parker. "Every motion is ready," Elaine said, flipping through her binder. "Asset freezes, paternity confirmation, financial tracing, digital records. We'll hit them all at once." Daniel nodded. "Make sure the first hearing's public." When the story hit the press 2 days later, it came with a headline that could silence a city. CEO's wife and business partner accused of fraud and infidelity. $12 million misappropriation. Lydia's world began imploding in real time. Her sponsors dropped her, followers turned, and every brand she'd used to polish her image issued statements of temporary suspension. Andrew tried calling Daniel once, his voice low, defeated. "We can talk, man. Let's not do this." Daniel simply replied, "Talk to my lawyer." In court, the tension was air thick. Reporters filled every seat. The hum of whispered questions rose as Daniel walked in, wearing a navy suit, calm as gravity itself. Lydia sat across the aisle. Her makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion anymore. Andrew kept his head down beside his lawyer. Elaine stood and spoke first. "Your Honor, this isn't just a case of adultery or emotional harm. This is about calculated deception that affected shareholders, trust, and the integrity of a company built from a man's hands." Then she began dropping evidence. Emails, messages, transfers, each one projected on the courtroom screen. The audience gasped at the pattern of stolen funds labeled as marketing fees, but transferred to Andrew's shell accounts. The opposing lawyer tried to object. Elaine smiled faintly. "Of course, counsel. But before we move to the next exhibit, please look at Exhibit 47. It was a DNA report. The courtroom went silent. "Mr. Cole," the judge said softly, "you're saying neither child is biologically yours?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's correct, Your Honor, but I raised them anyway." Lydia's sob caught like a spark. "Daniel, please." He didn't look at her. Elaine continued. "Yet she demanded child support, full spousal benefits, and claimed moral damages for emotional stress while maintaining a 6-year extramarital relationship with his business partner. Your Honor, that's not marriage. It's organized theft." The judge leaned back, stunned. Reporters scribbled furiously. Andrew's lawyer whispered something into his ear, and the man's composure shattered. "This is between her and me," he muttered. Elaine didn't miss it. "Let the record show that Mr. Carter just admitted the affair." Daniel kept his eyes forward, unblinking. For him, the trial wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, documented, verified, final. When court recessed, Lydia tried to approach him in the hallway. "Daniel, I made mistakes." He turned slightly, just enough for her to see the calmness in his face. "No," he said softly, "you made patterns." Then he walked away, leaving her surrounded by microphones, her mother crying beside her, and her lawyer whispering about plea negotiations. Outside, Elaine caught up to him. "You've won most of it already. The verdict will only make it official." Daniel nodded. "Good, because after this, I'm done talking about her." "What about him?" she asked. Daniel's eyes darkened, but his voice stayed even. "For Andrew Carter, I have one more lesson planned." He stepped into his car, the city flashing past like a memory he was ready to bury. Inside the folder on the seat beside him was the last motion, sealed, unseen, devastating. It wasn't just legal, it was personal, and it would end Andrew Carter's career before the month was over. Daniel didn't celebrate his courtroom victory. He just disappeared into silence. The headlines screamed for him. "Daniel Cole wins landmark case. Wife and business partner found guilty of fraud and deception." But the man himself, he stayed invisible. For the world, the war was over. For Daniel, the war was entering its final, most personal phase. Andrew Carter sat alone in his penthouse office overlooking downtown. The once confident executive now looked like a ghost in an expensive suit. Investors had fled, clients had vanished, and his company's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. When the elevator chimed, Andrew didn't even look up. He assumed it was one of his lawyers. "Rough day?" Daniel's voice came quietly, controlled, almost gentle. Andrew jerked his head up. "Daniel, what the hell are you doing here?" Relax, Daniel said, setting a folder on the desk. I'm not here to fight, just to give you something. Andrew hesitated. What is this? A truce? Daniel smiled faintly. Not exactly. He slid the folder forward. Inside were financial statements, notarized letters, and signed testimony from former employees. I spent the last 3 months rebuilding everything you destroyed, Daniel said, and I've been buying every debt your company owes. Andrew blinked. You're bluffing. No, Daniel said softly. I'm your new creditor. He leaned closer, his voice steady. The bank you owe $12 million to? The one that holds your personal guarantee? I own that loan now. Andrew's breath hitched. You can't. Oh, I can. And tomorrow I'm calling it due. Daniel stood, buttoning his jacket. You thought the courtroom was the end? That was just the audit trail. This is the sentence. Andrew's hand trembled. Daniel, listen. Lydia came to me first. I didn't plan this. Stop. Daniel's tone cut through the room. You had choices. You made greed look like loyalty. And for that, I won't yell. I'll just collect. He turned toward the window, looking out at the skyline both men once called their empire. I lost a family because of you. You'll lose everything else. Then he walked out, leaving the folder behind, the sound of the elevator doors closing louder than any curse. 3 days later, Andrew's accounts were frozen. His company filed for bankruptcy. Creditors turned against him. Anonymous leaks hit the media, emails proving corporate theft, insider trading, falsified audits. Each leak traced back to a source no one could find. At home, Lydia tried calling him, her number flashing on his cracked phone screen. He didn't answer. The same tabloids that once loved her now ran stories titled, The Affair That Bankrupted 2 Lives. In the chaos, Daniel remained quiet, untouchable. One evening, as he sat in the back of a cab, Elaine called, It's done. Andrew's been disbarred from corporate boards. He'll be lucky to keep his apartment. Daniel exhaled, the first sound of release in months. Good. Then the last step is mercy. Elaine paused. You're forgiving him? He smiled faintly. No. Mercy is making him live long enough to feel every consequence. The next morning, a single envelope arrived at Andrew's door. No signature, no threat, just one line typed neatly across white paper. Debt settled. You can keep what's left of your name. Andrew read it 3 times, his hands shaking. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a verdict. That evening, Daniel stood by the waterfront, wind brushing through his hair, city lights flickering like ghosts. He'd taken everything from the man who took everything from him. He'd turned humiliation into strategy. And for the first time, the silence inside him wasn't rage. It was peace. But as he watched the dark water, one question remained. If revenge gives back your pride, does it ever give back your soul? Lydia Cole had always believed image could heal everything, but no amount of filters could save a woman the internet now called the fraud wife. Her sponsorships were gone, her followers vanished overnight. The luxury apartment she'd once bragged about was sold to pay legal fees. Even her mother, Margaret, the woman who taught her to marry wealth, not love, had turned bitter. You should have been smarter, Margaret hissed. At least keep the children's story clean. Lydia slammed the door in her face. For the first time in her adult life, silence followed her home. No phone buzzing, no friends calling, just the echo of her own breath in a place too large for one broken person. A month after the verdict, she was summoned back to court for a hearing about damages. She walked into the marble hallway in a thrifted black dress, sunglasses covering eyes that hadn't slept in days. Daniel was already there, speaking quietly with Elaine. He looked rested, stronger, calmer, as if revenge had become closure. When he turned and saw her, their eyes met for the first time since the humiliation night at the gala. Lydia swallowed hard. You destroyed me, she whispered. Daniel's voice was even. No, Lydia, you destroyed yourself. I just kept the receipts. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings were clinical. Numbers, settlements, custody. Elaine spoke with surgical precision. My client requests full custody, financial restitution for embezzled assets, and revocation of Mrs. Cole's residual spousal benefits. Lydia's lawyer tried to plead for leniency. Your Honor, Mrs. Cole has lost everything. Her reputation, her income, her stability. Elaine didn't even flinch. Then she finally understands what she took. When the judge read the decision, the words felt like hammers. Full custody granted to Mr. Cole. Mrs. Cole found liable for damages totaling $2.4 million. Restricted parental visitation pending psychological evaluation. Lydia gasped audibly. The sound broke something fragile in the room. Daniel didn't look triumphant. He looked done. As court adjourned, she followed him into the hallway. "Daniel, please," she said, her voice cracking. "The kids. Let me at least see them. I made mistakes, but I still love them." He turned slowly, meeting her trembling eyes. "Love?" he said softly. "You don't destroy what you love, Lydia. You decorate it until it suffocates." Tears streaked down her face. "You've proven your point. You've won." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't win. I just stopped losing." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her an envelope. Plain, unmarked. "This is the last thing I'll ever give you," he said. "Open it when you're alone." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the empty hallway, clutching that single envelope like it might contain oxygen. That night, Lydia sat on her kitchen floor, the lights off, the city humming faintly beyond the window. She tore open the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single check. Amount 0 memo line, the value of honesty. Her sobs filled the dark, echoing off empty walls. For the first time, Lydia understood what true silence sounded like. Not peace, but absence. On her phone screen, photos from the past year scrolled by. Vacations, jewelry, smiling selfies with Andrew, captions that said, "Forever." Now every image looked like evidence in her own trial. She deleted them all. Then she deleted her account. Meanwhile, Daniel watched the same city from a hotel balcony. Elaine had suggested therapy. He declined. "I'm fine," he said quietly. "Some scars are just reminders." Elaine studied him for a moment. "You don't look fine." He smiled faintly. "I look free." As she left, he stood alone with the envelope duplicate in his hand. The check he knew she was reading right now. Not out of cruelty, but closure. Because revenge wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about truth standing longer than lies. The noise of destruction eventually fades. What follows is quieter, harder to live with. Weeks after the final hearing, Daniel moved into a smaller house on the edge of the city. Nothing grand, nothing hollow. The furniture was simple. The rooms still smelled of new paint and unfinished beginnings. He spent the first morning making pancakes with Ethan and Lily. They argued about chocolate chips, spilled batter on the counter, laughed like children who didn't understand the world had just reset around them. When Lily asked, "Dad, when's Mommy coming home?" Daniel hesitated, then knelt beside her. "Mom's finding her own home now." She nodded, satisfied with the gentleness in his voice, and ran off to chase her brother. He stood there for a moment, realizing that in his new quiet life, the loudest sound was forgiveness trying to be born. Elaine stopped by later that afternoon, dropping off the final case file for closure. "You could sue for more," she said. "Public restitution, book rights. People love redemption stories." Daniel smiled faintly. "I'm done turning pain into paperwork." She studied him for a moment. "You don't look like a man who won." He shrugged. "Winning and healing aren't the same thing." Outside, the sky shifted toward evening, the kind of light that softens everything it touches. Daniel leaned against the porch railing, looking at the kids playing in the yard. "I spent months planning how to destroy two people," he said quietly. "Turns out, rebuilding takes twice the work." Elaine nodded. "So rebuild." He smiled. "That's the plan." Days turned into weeks. Daniel poured himself into small routines, running at dawn, packing school lunches, cooking dinners that didn't need to impress anyone. He met with investors again, this time under his own name, rebuilding a smaller firm based on transparency. "No silent partners," he told them. "Not anymore." He even set up a scholarship fund for single fathers who lost everything in divorce battles. He named it the Second Foundation. When journalists asked if it was about revenge, he said, "It's about survival. Revenge just bought me the time to see the difference." One evening, while sorting mail, he found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for raising them right. I'll never ask for forgiveness, but I'll always hope they know I tried. Lydia." He read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a box labeled "Past." The next morning, he took Ethan and Lily to the park. They laughed, climbed, and fell. He caught them both with the same steady hands that had once signed away an empire. When Ethan looked up and said, "Dad, are you happy now?" Daniel smiled. "I'm getting there." That night, he stood by the window as city lights blinked in the distance. He thought about the empire he'd lost, the family that had betrayed him, the courtroom, the silence, the check for $0, and he finally understood. Revenge hadn't healed him. It had only cleared the ground so something honest could grow. He whispered to the night, "You took everything, but you couldn't take me." Then he turned off the lights, closed the curtains, and for the first time in years slept without a single nightmare. 5 years later, the city had changed, but Daniel Cole hadn't chased its new rhythm. He'd learned that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build slowly, quietly, one morning at a time. He sat in a sunlit office now overlooking the river, his name engraved modestly on the glass door, Cole Restoration Group. No more skyscrapers, no more empire wars. Just honest work rebuilding homes for families who'd lost theirs. He smiled at the irony. He'd spent half his life building structures, then destroying them. Now he built them again, but better, steadier. That afternoon, his assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Cole, there's someone here to see you. No appointment." He looked up from the plans spread across his desk. "Name?" "She says it's Lydia." He froze for a moment, the name landing like a ghost. "Send her in," he said finally. She entered quietly, not in designer clothes, no perfume, no mask. Just a woman who'd learned what truth feels like when it finally burns clean. Her eyes were tired, but they held something new, humility, maybe even peace. "Hi, Daniel," she said softly. He nodded. "It's been a long time." She smiled faintly. "I heard about the foundation, the projects. You're doing good things." "I'm trying," he said. There was silence between them, long, honest, unarmed. "I wanted to say thank you," she whispered, "for not ruining me more than I ruined myself." He looked at her for a long moment. "You did that part perfectly on your own." She nodded, no defense this time. "You were right, you know. Love isn't about decoration. It's about truth. I just didn't know what that looked like until I lost it." Daniel leaned back, studying her face, the woman who once smiled in diamonds, now fragile, human, real. "I don't hate you anymore," he said quietly. "I just don't carry you with me." Tears welled up, but she didn't hide them. "That's fair." He stood and walked her to the door. "Take care of yourself, Lydia." "You too, Daniel." She paused before leaving. Do the kids ever ask about me?" "Sometimes," he said. "I tell them their mother's alive. That's enough for now." Her eyes glistened. "Tell them I'm trying to be better." He nodded once. "If you keep trying, one day they'll see it themselves." She smiled, then left. When the door closed, Daniel looked out over the river again. The reflection in the glass wasn't the man who'd been betrayed. It was the man who survived it. He thought about how it all began. The business failure, the affair, the discovery, the unimaginable revenge. And somehow, after all that ruin, life had grown back. He whispered under his breath, "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you are." Outside, Ethan and Lily were waiting in the car, waving through the window. He grabbed his coat, locked the office, and walked out into the golden light. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Daniel Cole finally stopped looking back, because the man who once vowed to destroy everything now understood the real victory wasn't revenge. It was peace that couldn't be taken away.